Top of the hour, let's start our meeting. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, who's going to take over the roll call?
I can. Trustee Milky,
Here.
Trustee Lannon,
Here.
Trustee Hauk,
Here.
Supervisor Gunning,
Here.
Treasurer Rice here, and Trustee Worley is excused, and Clerk Cody is excused.
All right, we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda approved. Moving down to public comment, this is going to be 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. Opportunity for comments only. Questions will not be answered at this time by the board. Would anyone like to come forward and with public comment? Going once, going twice, public comment closed. Move to item 8, reports, board comments. We have a vacancy on the planning commission with 2 trustees not here. It would be neither fair to the applicant nor those members to nominate at this time, so we will push forward until the next trustee meeting, which would be, what date? We got, what, the 25th? So it'll be 3/25. Is Norm on vacation, or is he just sick, or do we have any explanation on Norm?
I believe he had a planned vacation.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, I think he's in
Bill will
Florida.
be
I think he's in
back by
Florida. I think so. I think he's in Florida.
Yeah, he's,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. All right.
Not
So
sure when he-
that
Yeah.
moves us to board member reports. Let's start with the really quick, succinct reports at this time. So I'm going to start with Mr. Milky.
I'll pass today, thanks.
All right.
That was succinct, right?
That was succinct, yes. Board review started on Monday with our long session from 1 o'clock to 8. We meet again on Thursday evening, so if there are residents who would like to come forward with any tax appeals, we're going to be in here, I believe, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, I believe, is Thursday, Thursday's time frame. We had about 12 applicants or appeals on Monday. All pretty simple stuff, some veterans exemptions. So, but it was pretty steady all through the day. So it was good to see. And that's me.
Can I have a question real quick on that?
Yeah, mhm.
So I believe that we voted to pass in the ability to submit your concerns or opposition to your assessment via mail. And I think the deadline was the 10th that was posted. I didn't know, because of trying to minimize public interaction at this point, if we might extend that date a little bit. I didn't know if that was been discussed by the staff at all or the board of review.
I don't know if it's going to be that much of an issue. The way we set up our room in there is the applicant comes in, sits in a separate area, and then the table that they come sit up at is a distance.
A distance, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we can, I think, minimize that, and just, we have hand sanitizer that maybe the clerk
Great.
will let us borrow from the election rooms. So if we have to do that, we can.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't really, I mean, the way we handle it in there, I think, is there's not a lot of
Okay.
close interaction. So
I just
I
know
don't know
some
if that's a
people are-
huge concern.
Very sensitive to it, and I didn't know.
Yeah.
Thought I'd bring it up. Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
I went
Oh,
to-
Kim, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Usually it's just taxes and the tax season's done, so
Yep.
go ahead.
Sidewalks and Pathways Committee met, and we are switching to meet quarterly. and that for our meetings now. So instead of once a month, we're going to be meeting quarterly. And that, so there was that. We also approved a letter that's supposed to come to the board, and that with everything in it. And so I think that'll be coming probably the next board meeting, not this one, just because it was so close in time. But that was basically the gist of it, was the letter and the goals and that we're going to be collecting information. We had some homework in that we're going to be doing to save for the next meeting. So
I have a question for you. And
Okay.
I might have asked this before, but I think it wouldn't be bad to repeat. So, your committee, we already have the GIS where we have the existing sidewalks, right? That was something
That
we've
was-
gotten in the last month or two, right?
yeah, the maps and stuff that were done, and
Now, are you guys planning on, because I know that we're planning this year on running a sidewalk from the Township Hall, I think, to meet up with the one down by Lux's.
that is a goal. Yep.
And then you have the one at McDonald's. So do we have like a specific plan that we're trying to target, completing one side of the road or other in a lot of these areas instead of having like kind of a hopscotch situation?
Yeah, so in the letter, we do address several goals that we have for the upcoming year. And, that includes like sidewalks on Lincoln. There's several like I think 3 main things that we want to accomplish in that for this year. Part of our homework is we will be taking and coming up with long-term goals as well as for the year, but also for next year. And there may be enough that we're going to do for multiple years to come kind of thing, of projects we would like to see done with the sidewalks and pathways, places we would like to focus on. And as a group, we will take that information and put together our list as a committee of priorities to send to the board, because ultimately all we are is, coming up with information and that kind of thing, that the board has to approve anything and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
that, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but.
That
but
helps. I just wanted to make sure that we actually had like a strategic goal
Yes,
on
yes.
completing
Yes.
sides of the road instead of,
Yes.
like I said, what we have in a lot of areas right
Yeah,
now.
and we're trying to get that, and a lot comes down to easements, things like that too, so,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
Brian.
So, I know in the past, one of the concerns from a township perspective is creating precedents if the township is helping either facilitate or fund in partial ways, right? Some of that. So is there discussion from your committee that you would create certain, I don't know, for lack of a better term, safety zones, where you would designate certain areas so that they fall under a different category than just a normal place where a sidewalk would be, so that we could justify why the township's willing to invest more in those areas for safety reasons? Or, I mean, how is that being approached? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
I think so, and I don't know that we've really, I mean, maybe Mr. Nanny can come up, but I don't know that we've really addressed that in the meeting. Maybe that's something we can bring up at the next meeting, and or I can get back to you on
Okay.
that.
I know on Bluegrass, there
But,
was a period of time where we gave extra incentives to the property owners.
Right,
And we did that through a zone, so
Right.
that we didn't want other property owners to feel like people are being treated differently. We had a safety reason for that at the time, right?
Right, and they have looked at a couple, or, we've talked about a couple of areas. We haven't actually, said, hey, what can we do to get this, kind of thing.
Okay.
So, that's probably something that's going to be at our next meeting, because I can guarantee there'll be probably a couple that are brought up, so,
Thank you.
yep.
Now, do you foresee changing your meeting frame from quarterly to monthly at some point in time? Or are you gonna, maybe when you get to a point where you feel like you need to meet quicker than in a 3-month period, that you'll
Well,
add special meetings in?
Well, it was a monthly, and you know, there wasn't enough in that monthly to really get it going. We need to have a little more time in between to kind of get some of these projects and get information for those projects, and that kind of thing. So, I mean, could there be the possibility of a special meeting? Sure. You know, if we think one needs to be in, you know, just like board of trustees, if there is a meeting that needs to happen, we can call one. But as of right now, we're sticking with the quarterly, and that we just switched to it, and we're going to give it a shot.
Okay.
So,
And then who's the chair on that committee?
Jeremy McDonald.
Chairman Beadle. Okay, all right.
So,
I have a question then.
okay.
Ben, you were just saying if we're gonna put sidewalk out here, you wanna know what we're gonna do all the way down the road, if it's gonna go all the way down this road. Well, what do you do with a guy like Gary Leisure? Gary owns a quarter of a mile down there. He's got no incentive to put sidewalk in. Why should he have to? I mean, I don't feel
Is
he
that
should
the
have to.
farming?
Right.
The,
I
is
mean,
the
he
farming?
owns
The
a
farmer?
quarter of a mile. Like,
Yeah. And
what incentive does he have to put sidewalk in? Why should he have to pay to have sidewalk put in? He's not a business. It's not going to benefit him. So what do we do in a situation like that?
right, and that has been brought up, and to be honest with you, I don't have an answer.
Well, I
We
just-
don't have an answer for
You know, and
that, you
that's a-
know, and we
That's a
see
wonderful
that,
question. Yeah.
and we see that, you know, but in the same light, you know, you also have to remember that we've got to be, you know, smart with the township's money as well, and that kind of thing. We can't just say, hey, let's put
Right.
this in, you know, free to you kind of thing.
Right.
We you know, and we understand that. And one of the things that we have to look at from now until our next meeting is those goals, and maybe come up with ideas of things we can do. And maybe the board has some ideas that I would be more than happy to bring back to the committee, you know. I'm more than open to
Right.
getting that information to them, so.
Well, one thing I do want to mention, I'm sorry, Brian, let me just throw this one in, is that we do have a precedent set from the standpoint that the EDA is committing the money to connect Township Hall to the existing sidewalks. And so we already have a precedent where we have the Masonic Home and the church essentially are going to get a sidewalk that they're not going to have any funding in. And so, in my mind, we've already set a precedent that we're willing, for the safety and well-being, which is one of our charges of the constituents, to make sure, ensure that there is that existing pathway. You do have the Commission on Aging, you have a daycare center, we have a park, and we have McDonald's down the street, right? And so there might be a day where people might want to take the stroll. And so putting a sidewalk in there, maybe, you know, with, and I hate to say this, but when you have an organization that runs huge surpluses every year, we should start looking at projects like that.
So I had brought up my question partly because of what you brought up about leisure and how, you know, it's in particular vacant lots, people aren't going to want to improve those
Right.
lots, right?
He doesn't want anybody.
Right. But I think you just answered part of my question is this is a special district in that it's a DDA. And that makes the justification from my perspective that, you know, there's a reason that the township can invest in this is because we're actually capturing for this.
Good point.
And we have to be careful as a DDA too, because, you know, our charge, obviously, we can look at that and we can say that increases or makes business development more attractive.
Right.
Right.
Right? I mean, yeah,
Right.
there's a reason for it.
Yeah, but
Right.
and but you know, again, we can't look at the EDAs necessarily as the piggy bank either.
Right.
And so the general fund of the township is also you know, I mean, if the EDA puts 100,000 into some project, then, you know, maybe the general fund should put in a commitment also.
So if the EDA is taking that on, is that then the responsibility maintenance-wise as far as like shoveling and, you know, I know in the East EDA, the township takes care of that, right?
Yeah.
Is that been decided or?
I think Mr. Nanny's gonna be doing that, aren't you? You guys getting him a little John Deere to buzz down the sidewalks in the wintertime?
I think I've heard a volunteer right here, right? That's what I'm hearing.
You know, on Pickard Street, we have Doug Small Engine is contracted to clean the sidewalks.
Right. So I didn't know if we were
That's
doing the same
one of
kind
the
of thing.
things that you have to look at.
Okay.
I mean, because, you know.
That's not been decided yet,
We
then.
can't have sidewalks that have snow on them, right?
Right.
You gotta clear them, so.
And
Yeah.
and those are all questions that, you know, we've brought up in our meetings, and that we don't have answers.
Yeah.
And hopefully with our next meeting, we'll have some goals that we can look at some of that stuff, or maybe we'll come up with ideas, or if you guys have ideas, I'm more than happy to let them know.
Yeah, if the township is going to be the one to push and invest it, you can't expect the Gary Leisures to suddenly have to have the responsibility of maintaining the sidewalk that they probably didn't want in the first
Didn't
place.
want. Yeah.
You don't want.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that battle sounds very familiar to what goes on inside the city limits.
Yeah.
Little did we know the sidewalk and pathways discussion would turn into Pandora's box, but
Yeah.
it was good conversation, though.
Yes, thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Kim.
Bill?
I think Kim and I were at probably the shortest Isabella County Road Commission meeting I've ever been to. There was no new business, no old business. I did find out one thing, though. They had a staff report on the Waymaster. When there are fines to truckers and stuff, nobody guess where those funds go to. They go to the local libraries. I thought they went to the road commission. But if a trucker gets pulled over and they're overweight, if that fine goes to the library. So, anyways, and then the lady that stopped in here, that Pat Heitman, that is over on Isabella Road, she voiced her concerns. She was there that night. She voiced her concerns about the safety factors on Isabella Road. And once again, they brought up the discussion where we're waiting for 2 easements. And I did go by there today, and it was suggested that the road commission paint a line on the southeast corner of Isabella and High Street so the property owners know where that would go. And that line hasn't been painted yet, but I'll ask them tomorrow morning at their meeting if they're planning on putting that line there so those ladies could see it. So, that's all I have to report.
Good question for you, Bill, and you have the road commission meeting tomorrow night?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning? Is maybe we could find out for the residents, because this is gonna be a big issue in Mount Pleasant this year is gonna be the M20 construction. And when they're gonna start, I know they're gonna be doing this, but I think they're
April,
also
isn't it?
doing,
They're going
Do they
from
have a
Mission
date?
to,
I believe the job is bid in April.
Okay.
I think it is start a little bit.
they're gonna make a right.
June, July, you think, or?
Where at?
They're gonna make a right-hand turn lane on Pickard, on M20, High Street and Mission.
Mission.
So you're gonna be able to go left, right, and straight. You know, like right now, the
Yeah. Everybody uses
the
it
one
like one, but
lane
it's not really there.
is right or left, or right
Yeah.
or straight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many times have you guys been there? I was there one time and some lady got out of her car yelling at me and told me to get in my right lane. Well, I was turning right. I was in the right lane. She wanted to go straight, and I mean, I'm gonna report you into the police. Well,
Okay.
there's 2 lanes. There's a left-hand turn lane, so whatever. They're gonna fix that. They're gonna make it where there's a right-hand turn lane.
I don't think they determined exactly when they were gonna start that, because they're gonna coordinate that with the city and the local reviewing on Mission and Pickard.
Right, there's a lot of work
So
going
they're
on.
gonna coordinate those 2 jobs, so they hadn't scheduled that construction yet, but they were bidding. I believe it was the April one they were gonna bid.
So that's going from Lincoln all the way, how far out west or east then?
What's that?
The Pickard, M20.
Pickard, they're going from Mission, they're going from what?
Only in the city limits, that's a city job.
Oh, it's going to stop at
From
the city.
Bamber to, I don't know if they're going all the way to.
Because what they're doing on the west side, though,
I
is
don't
they're going to
know the
Lincoln,
mission,
right?
Yes,
M20.
Yeah, so they come into the township on this side, but, okay.
that's from Mission to Lincoln Road.
And the other one's from the expressway to Mission, right?
Probably to Bamber.
Is it all the way to Bamberg? Wow,
Well, the city owns up to Bamber Road.
okay. Okay, get ready for construction season.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Yep. Tim?
Now that I have some clarity on succinct board reports. I had the opportunity to attend March 3rd Isabella County Board of Commissioners meeting. Certainly the highlight of the meeting that night was the 15 minutes we enjoyed birthday cake for Administrator Margaret McAvoy's birthday they were celebrating. But they did do a little business. They presented a snapshot in time and approved and filed their first quarter 2020 budget report. They implemented information they gained from the Seagull Water wage and salary study and increased some salaries and wages in the Treasury Department. They contracted with the Isabella County Sheriffs to have a present out at the Youth Farm Fair this year. And they appropriated some money to paint the hydro-pneumatic storage tank that was installed in about 1973 to the Lake Isabella water system. And that's all I have.
Wow. I was just think that Kim was gonna be the long one in this. There you go. Threw me
Thank you,
there.
Tim.
Okay, item 9, consent agenda. Need to have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support.
And who checked the warrants?
I think it may have been.
I
Nora.
did.
Tim.
Oh,
I pinched hit for Norm today.
All good?
Spot on as far as I could tell.
All right. All right. So we need a motion to approve. We have a motion to
I gave the
approve.
motion to
He gave
approve.
the
Okay, we have
motion,
the
I gave the
second.
support.
Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approved. We're on to item 10, new business. Item A is consideration to approve the 2020 Township brine participation contract with the Isabella County Road Commission for the application of brine and authorize the township manager to sign said contract. Mr. Stuhldreher, you want to bring us up to date on that?
Thank you. The amount of this contract is $18,360.82. There's a write-up about this on page 21 of your agenda packet. The amount is the same as last year, which is good. And as part of the annual road maintenance program, the Road Commission applies brine to, we have approximately 20 miles of gravel road throughout the township. Contract calls for 3 applications per year, which is the same as it has been in the last several years anyways. And the reason they do this is it improves the surface stability, it reduces the frequency of having to add additional aggregate, and over time it improves the condition and the rideability of the road. It's an annual contract. We recommend approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2020 Township brine participation contract with the Isabella County Road Commission for the application of brine in the amount of $18,360.82 and authorize the township manager to sign the contract.
Support.
Motion support discussion?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Why does the county pay 8.3% of the cost of that? I'm not sure. They talk about a mutual or joint contract. I was just interested if why the number is how it is.
I can't recall off the top of my head what the basis for that cost sharing is, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay. All right, I just, I couldn't recall either. It's a worthy project. The township pays roughly 92% of the cost of that to continue to help maintain county roads, but understanding our citizens get value out of that. But I also find it interesting that they'll charge us interest rate on a delayed payment after 30 days, which we're paying to brine their roads. And if we miss the payment by a day, we get an interest fee. So, I don't know. I'd consider a rewrite of that next time.
I don't know, maybe one reason is we do ours 3 times. I don't know why that is that way.
We'll find out for you.
Yeah, and I had the similar question, mostly because I had thought of how we do all the other roads. It's a very different cost sharing model, and why the brine is separate from paved roads, right? Why?
Never heard a reason why. Has anybody else? Never heard.
Thanks for bringing that up, Tim. But I think it's a good project as well. You're welcome, county.
Let's make sure we pay it on time, right?
Right?
Yeah.
All right, so this would be to approve the 2020 brine participation contract with the Isabella County Road Commission for the application of brine in the amount of $18,360.82, and authorizing the township manager said to sign said contract. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. And we move on to item B. This is the introduction and the first reading of the proposed extraction ordinance. I'm not sure how we want to do this, Mark. Do we want to have Mr. Nanny come up, or would you like to handle this, or?
I'll start.
Okay.
Thank you. So, at the January 9th Board of Trustee meeting, you all placed a temporary moratorium on extraction operations in the township. And that was to give the staff an opportunity to study and potentially recommend updates to the existing regulations that exist in the township. And they exist primarily, or maybe solely right now, within the zoning code. We've completed that review, and it's resulted in the recommendation that's before you tonight. If you do want to move forward, you'd hold your first reading tonight, introduce it, hold a first reading. What we're doing here is going through the process of adopting a general ordinance. What I refer to as a general ordinance. It's not a zoning code ordinance. The staff and the township attorney have worked together to prepare this proposal. As I indicated, it removes the regulation of these operations out of the zoning code and into a new standalone ordinance that we're allowed to adopt per the provisions of the Charter Township Act. This ordinance provides for and establishes standards as it relates to the permit approval process. It addresses the operations of I'll call it the extraction operation, reclamation of land at the end of the operation, goes into great detail on the administrative process and inspection requirements to verify that the operation is in fact operating as the permit allows for. The staff is recommending that we take this out of the zoning code and put it into the general ordinances for a couple reasons. One, the zoning code limits the notice requirements for special use permits to properties within a 300-foot radius of the subject property. And for most land use operations, that's adequate. For this type of thing, we think something wider than that would be appropriate, and we can set those ourselves if we have it outside of the zoning code. Also, within the zoning code, a lot of our regulations are limited to the specific parcel of land that's in question, that's being developed. By taking it out of that code and putting it as a general ordinance, we can deal with things that are off-site from the subject property or subject parcel. So we can get into things like road maintenance and impacts and those sort of things, water tables, wells that might be in proximity to the operation but aren't sitting right inside the subject parcel. This ordinance does place the authority for review and holding a public hearing, the issuing the permit with the planning commission. So in the general ordinance, it spells out in some 30-some pages all the regulations. And then there's an application process. Staff does its work, takes it to the planning commission, and then their job is to review it to see if it comports with all the regulations in the code, and then does its approval process. Also, since it's being taken out of the zoning code, it becomes and so there'll be two things happening. One tonight is starting a path of approving this ordinance. And then another path is going to need to be taken to amend the zoning ordinance itself, because that's where the existing regs exist. And so those regs will be extracted from that ordinance, and what instead will be placed in the zoning code is reference to this general ordinance. It does call for a permit fee. So if we do continue to move forward and this gets approved, we'll need to amend the fee schedule that the township has adopted to include this extraction permit fee. It also allows for the establishment of escrow, the deposit of money into escrow to pay for the various things that the township would have to do to monitor water tables and compliance and those sorts of things. So that's a high level. There's a lot in this ordinance. I would like, and if you'd indulge us, I would ask Mr. Nanny to come forward and speak in a bit more detail regarding the content of this ordinance.
Thank you. I think, as I said, that was an excellent summary. Just a couple of details I'd like to talk about. This is an extraction ordinance that is intended to cover non-metallic mineral extraction, so sand and gravel, but also other types of non-metallic mineral potential projects. It is also intended to cover the full range of possible extraction operations. Some are maintained above the water table. They deliberately stay above the groundwater level. Others mine into the groundwater level, so they're basically creating lakes or ponds. This ordinance covers both instances. There are far more rigorous information requirements and standards that apply if they go into the groundwater level, and there's additional standards that have to be met. So a lot of the document gets into those extra details that apply for that type of a project. The ordinance is intended to make sure that the township and the plan commission in particular have the information they need to truly judge whether this operation is going to be both consistent with the ordinance requirements, but also is going to be not going to be a nuisance or a problem for the environment or for surrounding property owners. So there's a set of what the ordinance calls base documents, from a survey to existing conditions, a map looking at what's on the property now, to information about soils and about water levels, and other documentation to ensure the Plan Commission can make an informed decision on any extraction operation. It also requires both a mining plan, and it's a long-term mining plan, to look at not only what are they going to mine within the term of the permit, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but also look at what is the long-term plan overall, beyond the immediate term of this current permit, and the details of that, and then a plan for reclamation, including a plan for conceptual end use, ideas of what's this property going to become when it's done. Most extraction operations, that end use is going to be residential. I have seen a couple of cases in my career where it's been returned to agricultural use, and it is possible, if things are done carefully and enough topsoil is available, that it can go back to an agricultural use at the end if that was the desire. But the idea is to have the end in mind, envisioned right at the beginning of the process, so that we can evaluate whether they can actually do that. Will there be sufficient land, buildable land, to be able to do what they're intending to do with this property at the close of the process. One of the key changes from the existing zoning ordinance. The existing ordinance, the special use permit requirements for sand and gravel say that no excavation can come closer than 100 feet from a residence, and that's a residence on a neighboring property, or within 50 feet of any road right-of-way or other lot boundary. The proposed ordinance changes that. We go from 100 feet to 500 feet from existing residences on neighboring properties. And we go from 50 feet from lot boundaries and road rights-of-way to 200 feet. Those are significant numbers. That's a significant setback, but it's all about protecting the neighboring property from potential impacts. 50 feet, 100 feet, those are numbers that simply don't provide enough room to, for example, to build perimeter berms, to raise up a berm that can help to prevent noise impacts, light and dust impacts, reduce the problems for neighbors. The setbacks that are proposed will provide plenty of room to be able to create those perimeter berms. Those perimeter berms are typically where the topsoil ends up, that they're saving to be able to put back on the project at the end. So it actually is a good way to go. Puts that topsoil in a spot where it can be used in the interim as the screening measure, but also have it available at the end to finish the site. The other big change is related to slopes. The current special use requirements for sand and gravel allow the finished grade of an extraction operation site to be to a 2-to-1 slope. That's 2 feet horizontal for every foot of vertical drop. And that's a fairly steep slope. That's steeper than is really safe you can't mow it, number one. But it's also not really safe to simply go up and down. It is a very steep slope in terms of the potential for erosion and a challenge with getting ground cover to flourish in that area. So the proposed ordinance moves to a minimum slope of 4-to-1, so 4 feet horizontal for every foot vertical. This is similar to what you would find at a house that has a walkout basement, where you drop down from the front to the back of the house. Is typically at a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 slope. It's a slope that you can mow. It's a slope that ground cover will establish without any trouble. And so it's a slope that's far more functional for the future use of the property. A couple other just items. The permit process has an initial permit period that's proposed, and then for renewals, there's the opportunity for a longer period of time for a permit renewal. But there's also a requirement in the ordinance for an annual report. Basically, the idea is that the extraction operator has to come to the planning commission every year and present a report. Basically, this is what I've done over the course of the year, this is how much material we've mined, this is what we've reclaimed, and just report in on what's going on. These are the complaints we've received and what we did to address them. And it's the idea of having an opportunity for a dialogue with the planning commission. If the township has any concerns, they can also be brought up through that process. That communication is key to success in working with extraction operations. I think those are the key items that I wanted to bring up. There are requirements there for financial guarantees. Mark mentioned the requirements potentially for an escrow deposit to help take care of defray costs related to inspections and processing of applications. But with that, other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So, the one thing that really jumps out at me is saying non-metallic minerals. Do we have anything, or would we have a need to address metallic minerals? Or is that out of the
State.
scope of what our earth is?
Those are essentially under state regulation. We have
Okay.
very limited scope within to work here.
All right.
You know, oil and gas and metallic minerals, it's all regulated by the state.
All right. Thank you, Red.
There's a lot here, by the way, and I have to admit that
Right.
I really enjoy zoning ordinance. I mean, I've worked in the planning commission, and we have a planning commissioner here, in fact, tonight. But this is an area I never spent a lot of time in. We don't have these kind of applications every day, right? So it was interesting to read, but I don't feel like I'm any expert by any means on this stuff. In section 11, can we address a certain section I'm curious about? I'm assuming this is where it would have been, and if it was somewhere else in the ordinance, I missed it. But in 11.4, which talks about nature of operations, what's there is great. What I didn't see that I expected to see there, and maybe you have it somewhere else, is more potential control over hours of operation that the township may have.
Yeah, there are specific hours of operation. It's actually a little further back.
Yep,
Oh, it's farther back?
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are very specific hours of operation.
7 a.m. to something, I think.
Okay.
7 to 5? Is that what I read?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just expected it when I was reading that section, and I'm like, oh, must be somewhere else, and I must not have picked it up later, because, like I said, it's a lot to read.
Yeah, section 11 is all about, it's an environmental impact analysis, and so that
Okay.
little subset is just intended to say this is, kind of give a summary of the operation.
Right.
Section 13.3 is where the hours of operation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Glad you addressed it. It's brilliant to take this out of the zoning ordinance, by the way. I think that was your idea. So kudos. So with the planning commission, obviously then, if they go through the permitting process, that also comes to the board of trustees.
Actually, as this is written, it would be strictly with the planning commission.
Yeah, I wondered, is there a reason not to come to the board of trustees? Is there a reason you chose that versus just to simplify the process, or?
Although there's a lot of information that's required, this is really similar to a site plan review, in the sense that you meet these requirements and you get approved for a permit. And so because it is essentially equivalent of a site plan review, we chose to keep it in the planning commission's hands.
And that makes some sense, because, I mean, in our current zoning, it would be under an SUP, special use permit. I tried to read this section twice, not just in the write-up on this. This is not a police powers, correct, act regarding grandfather kind of stuff?
The only in zoning ordinance is there an issue with grandfathering or legal.
So this becomes essentially a police powers where existing operations would have to come up.
All the operations have to meet the same rules.
That's what I was taking from this as well. I just want to make sure that was clear. And then just kind of a general question. I was just curious, with the planning commission going through the rewrite with the current vendor helping the planning commission do that, was a lot of this language something that vendor had already worked on and we took from that, or is this stuff that comes from your background experience, or a mix of that? I'm just curious.
This is from my background. I have worked in a number of communities that have gravel pits. One of my former clients I've worked for has 3 active gravel pits, and And this ordinance is one that I had worked on with them and updating, and it's one that has worked very well. And not only was the community happy with, and the attorney's happy with it, but the gravel pit operators were also comfortable with it. They didn't like it, but they were comfortable with it, and it worked very well for everybody. It's an ordinance that has been tested, and so I adapted that language for this community.
Awesome. So I should thank Mark for finding you then.
So Rodney, in that previous community that you were just talking about, how did it compare to Union Township? Was it a more rural township?
It is, other communities, a rural community, yes. It has a.
More rural than
It is more
Union
rural
Township?
than here, yes. Yeah, they don't have full-time staff. They have no full-time officials. It's a very rural community.
Not as many residents, not as many homes.
No.
Businesses.
It's about, probably in the range of about 4,000 residents, I think.
See, so my whole deal with this whole thing is, why are we screwing around doing all this stuff? Why don't we just say we're gonna ban any extraction of sand or gravel?
That is a great question.
Because the restrictions we're putting on all this stuff, I don't know if I'm a excavator, a developer, I'm not gonna wanna screw with all this stuff. Why not just ban it?
Well, I will say this. First of all, I mentioned earlier that we worked within a narrow window of regulation under the state rules. The state has determined essentially that sand and gravel is an important resource, just as it says right in the beginning of the ordinance.
Right.
And really, quite frankly, it is. We can't have road construction without
Right.
it.
We can't
do
build
building
buildings.
construction without it. We do need these resources.
We
And
do.
they also do, as it says right at the beginning of the ordinance, they do have to be sourced locally, because you don't want to be trucking them in 100 miles.
Right.
It just simply is not feasible to do it from a cost perspective. So there is a recognition that this is an important resource.
Yeah.
We as a township really can't essentially exclude it entirely. I suspect that the township attorney will stand up and say that he would not want to make that fight. So what we've done is we've essentially set up rules that ensure these operations can happen. It just simply, they need to happen within guidelines and ensure that they are not causing damage or nuisance conditions for their neighbors. It's a tough thing to do. These are operations that raise a lot of dust, that do have noise. They do have even light impacts from equipment running, of course, in the early hours, especially in the fall and winter. So they have impacts on their neighbors. The goal of this ordinance is not in any way to prohibit them. It's to say you need to operate within a certain range that protects the neighbors around you while you're operating.
And I think that's primary concern that we have, right, is protecting neighbors' property values and their livelihoods and
Well,
their
the
environment.
demographics of our township,
Right.
it's gonna be hard to meet all these. You know, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've had an excavator come to me. He knows I have sand on my property. I'm not, no, forget it. Don't even come out and do a bore. I'm not gonna go through all this. It's not worth it. You know, there's just so many regulations that it's not worth it. So that's my deal, is why don't we just ban it in the township? We're never gonna get one in this township with all of these regulations.
So, as I said, these regulations have been used for many years, and companies have successfully operated under them with, brought in new operations. Also, of course, some operations have been around a long time. So it is possible. To some extent, the amount of regulation depends on the type of operation. If they're not going down below the water table, the amount of information that's required is significantly less. And the amount of regulation is significantly less. They'll still have to deal with the setbacks, they still have to deal with the berms and the basic requirements. But much of this ordinance, in terms of the details, gets into what happens when you decide to mine below the water table and potentially affect groundwater and affect wells in the neighborhood and that sort of thing. So, and it does need to be there because there's always potential somebody's going to do that.
Well, the water table's risen in this area over the last 2 or 3 years. We've had so much rain. I mean, seriously, the water table has risen. You know, the road commission, what'd they say? It's risen 3 feet over here at the road commission when they originally built another building there. Now they look at the water table and I think they said it's risen 3 feet. So they're having to bring more dirt in and stuff when they're gonna build their new building. So,
How many existing facilities do we have that would fall under this?
Two.
Well, we have, of course, the one that has applied, that's not existing yet, but obviously has made an application. There are 2 other sites in the township that I'm aware of, where there has been some kind of extraction activity in the past. There doesn't appear to be any in current
Nothing
moment, but there
major.
has been some activity in the past that if they were to continue that activity would fall under this ordinance.
So they would have to, they've been extracting out of that site and say haven't been extracting, but if they go back in, then they would have to, or they would have to because they've already been in there and it is a known extraction area that before they could even begin or even currently even without, they would have to fall under some of this stuff.
This is a permit to operate, so this is a permit that looks at establishing, essentially it's a licensing ordinance, we call it a permit, but it essentially provides a license to operate an extraction operation at the site. So that when they are looking to operate, that, to extract further materials, that's when they would fall under this requirement.
And as I understood it, just to restate, because of the Zoning Enabling Act, this not being under that zoning, this is not a grandfather situation, I think like you were describing, right?
When you said that,
Yeah.
it kind of perked my ears up a little bit. I would think that could possibly be a contentious part of this whole thing, eh?
Yeah, but it did sound like the 2 that you're aware of are not active at this point, so, and haven't been for some time, I'm assuming.
That's, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Any further questions at all? All right. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. So what do we do now?
That's a great question. I was wondering the same thing. Are we
We're all looking
doing
at each
anything
other like-
beyond just reading
It's
this?
just a reading.
This is a reading, so there is no action on this.
Oh, he's gonna say, because it says discussion action, so. Mark, what do we do?
I would make a motion to hold a first reading, that's what you're doing, and that, but you want to evidence that. Make a motion to introduce and hold a first reading for,
The proposed
Proposed.
extraction ordinance.
All right,
I'd make a motion to introduce and conduct a first reading of the proposed extraction ordinance.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So at this point in time, where this would go to a public hearing, correct?
no.
No.
It does not
Because it's not
require-
going into the zoning ordinances, then it wouldn't be
Right.
required to go into a public
The-
hearing.
Assuming you have a positive vote tonight, the next steps would be a second reading at your next board meeting later this month, and consider for final adoption. And there's some publication requirements. Following tonight, we'd have to publish, I think, at least a summary, if not the entire thing, in the paper. We have to publish it after it's been adopted, those sorts of things. But there is not a public hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it would take immediate effect following the publication, assuming you adopted the ordinance at your next meeting.
So if this were to pass through this board, go through the public process and pass, and adoption happens, because of the current languages in the zoning, do we not have to take care of that?
We're going down
repeal?
that path.
We don't have to do that immediately, though?
I would say we're doing it concurrently. At the next planning commission meeting, they're gonna be taking action to do that text amendment, if you will.
Okay. Contingent on this, essentially? The existing ordinance, sorry.
You won't be left without an ordinance. I think is kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, and well, I guess my question was more related to, once this becomes an ordinance outside of the zoning, how quickly is that being taken out of the zoning, what's currently there?
The planning commission's dealing with that later this month, and that action culminates with action by the Board of Trustees, which we have scheduled, I want to say, for the first meeting in April.
Thank you.
It'd virtually be concurrent. This goes into effect.
Yes,
The zoning ordinance goes out of effect.
right.
That's very helpful, Mark. Thank you.
To me, this seems like a really thought-out process. I'd give credit to the staff and the board to ensure an activity like this that can have so much impact is done with a big picture view from cradle to grave. And there's certainly various types of mining techniques, and some much more less scarring to the earth than others. And I think this would probably allow us to get the all-important aggregates out of our earth to build and develop in a manner that's most healthful to the community and our land.
I will add, and I failed to mention it, as it relates to the zoning code, in addition to the wording in the zoning code would be referencing the regs that are contained in this ordinance here, but it is a use allowed by right under it would be a use allowed by right within the zoning code in an ag district. It would not be a special use anymore.
Great. Governed by this ordinance.
Governed by this ordinance.
Call the question. Unless you have something. Unless you have something to say, I mean, call
I'm
the
just
question.
still, I guess, a little, I just think it, I guess I think that I'm having a hard time with the non-public hearing portion of this whole thing. I know we've had, some public comment on this subject, and a lot of residents expressed their opinions, and the proposed applicant that wants to put in a facility has also voiced his opinion. But as Bill said, it's pretty, I don't know, I guess comparing it to what we had before, and I guess it'd be nice to have had what we had before and be able to lay them both down and see how much more, I mean, I guess we're almost kind of, who actually understands all this, what we're approving? We've had this for, 4 days? It's a lot. It's a lot. And I'm just having a real difficult time personally jumping into a pool of water until I know how cold the water is. And I would personally feel more comfortable having more time to digest this. And I don't know, by approving this and moving to the next level, if we're pushing ourselves into a situation where we're making an approval on something where maybe it's too restrictive. Maybe it doesn't protect enough. But, I mean, this is a really long document with a lot of verbiage. And I would have felt probably a lot more comfortable with more time to digest it. So that's where I'm at this point in time.
I definitely hear your concern. I mean, it was obvious I wasn't able to memorize this either, and there's a lot here, and I enjoy reading this stuff for some reason, right? But this is a first reading, so now we have ample opportunity before second reading to digest this, and we can hit the brakes at any point if we feel the need to.
Okay. Because the second hearing is when we'd be making the vote on this, right? Or the second reading is when we'd be making it goes,
Holding a public hearing at that point,
Public
yeah.
hearing.
well, no,
Correct.
there's no public hearing.
There's
You're-
no,
Well, you're going to publish it. I'm assuming we have to,
Well, this whole thing, I mean, if I'm an excavator and I see, you know, okay, there's sand on that 40 acres, I look at all this and I think to myself, well, I gotta go through all of this. Is it worth it to me? Maybe it is to them. So then they go through, they say, okay, I'm gonna go forward with it. Then it goes to the planning commission. And then they turn around, then they have public hearings. So this is a difficult deal, no doubt about it. I mean, personally, if I look at it, if I'm a developer or an excavator, I say, hey, Isabella Township, or hey, Deerfield Township, what do you have? You know, I mean, we're never gonna have any there's not gonna be anything in this township with all these regulations. And then we have to look at, like what Rodney said, you know, we want to develop roads, we want to build buildings, we want to build homes. Well, when you're trucking stuff in from miles away, it costs more than it does when it's in your own backyard. So look at like Detroit. One of the main reasons that it costs so much for road construction in those areas is because they have to truck everything in. So I guess I can't just use that as an example, but when you hear the road commission talk about why it costs so much more to build roads in those rural areas, or those city areas, I mean, that's why it costs so much, because they have to have everything trucked in. Why do you think Fisher has 200 trucks? You know, they know where the money's at.
This seems about as complicated or less complicated than the lady who wanted to have a daycare in her house came before us.
Yeah,
What she had to go through
right.
was no more difficult than what a professional excavation company.
Well, they know if they wanted to, you know, they look at this and they're thinking, well, it's worth it to me to go through all this, then they're gonna go through it. You know?
If it's important enough to them, you know, they'll want to go through this and do it. Just like, say it was about painting, you know, you'd be going through that.
Right.
You know, it's all a matter of what's important to you and that kind of thing.
you know,
So,
if you watch the planning commission go through an SUP, they do pretty good due diligence on making sure that whatever requirements they feel are necessary, that's why it's an SUP, right? Is that they have
Right.
the right to impose special restrictions or oversight. And I really, this provides a framework
Yeah.
that's already there because, as you said, I mean, we're not experts in this stuff, right? And this provides the planning commission the framework that's already there. I mean, it's essentially saying this is what our SUPs would look like, right? Except that we're moving out of the zoning and saying this is formal for everything.
Right.
And it's non-discriminatory and every operation would be treated the same.
right.
Yeah.
Rodney, I got a question for you. At any point in time in this process, did you confer with any of the excavators in the area to go through this and see what concerns that they had with this ordinance?
I have not met with excavation companies in the immediate area here, no. Like I said, my experience with this type of ordinance is outside of Isabella County, but it's certainly I have met and spoken with and interacted with a number of extraction operators, sand and gravel pit operators in other communities, including the community from which this ordinance began, that has several operations in it. So I have a lot of experience working with this particular industry.
But we didn't reach out to anybody here at all
No,
before we...
No. We have invited the current applicant has received a copy of the ordinance and certainly aware that it's moving forward through this process, but we did not have conversation with local contractors.
Yeah. That's all. Well, my last comments on this is, everybody will be happy with me when I finally shut up on this probably, but I still have a real problem with jamming a lot of restrictions on these companies without their opportunity to have a discussion. I feel like we're kind of forcing this through a little quick. I would prefer to have personally more time to digest, but I think that it impacts an important function in our community, and I don't know if they've had necessarily due diligence on this. I almost kind of feel like it'd be like almost what the city did with building contractors by changing the roof lines of houses that were ridiculous, and limiting where they can put their garages, and it's become so controversial because there wasn't any real interaction. And so I'm going to be voting accordingly, so, yes.
So with that, I want to ask the manager a question. If we were to delay the process one additional board meeting into April, to allow for some additional time that supervisors expressed feels he needs, does that upset the apple cart as far as the coordination with the extraction from the zoning, et cetera?
I don't believe it does. What you have a couple things. You have a moratorium in place, and that went into effect January 9th. It had a 125-day period. I want to say that then expires early May 9th, maybe something like that. So you have that deadline. Once the moratorium's up, the old regs are back in effect. I don't know, Rodney, are you? I don't think it has an impact on the adoption of this. It probably has more of an impact on what may be going on the moratorium side.
When we did the moratorium, I thought we left language that we could extend that if we needed to. Is that not accurate?
You can extend that. It allows for an appeal process that nobody's taken advantage of yet.
Yep.
As was communicated when the moratorium went into effect, there's differences of opinion as to whether a moratorium is legitimate or not. We think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But if the township has taken so far the position that they didn't want operations to exist under the existing code. You placed a moratorium on it. You asked us to do what we did. We think we've achieved a pretty good balance between the rights of the landowner and the community at large. The only outreach to anybody on the business side was to the current applicant under the old rules. And what happened there was a phone call was made, an email was sent. They were given this document, and I left a voicemail. I did not get a call back. They are not here tonight.
How many days' notice do you have?
That is, I would I was expecting the applicant to be here, that they're not, or any representative would be intentional. And I called them last Thursday.
All right, I just want, you know. how
It
many
was
days
almost
notice?
immediately after you received the packet. And I did, quite honestly, I did consider reaching out to at least the applicant for input into the ordinance. And I decided that at that time, that wasn't a good course of action. I anticipated that that discussion may come up tonight and thought it best be dealt with by this body. So, as has been mentioned, there's a second reading. I don't believe there's a requirement for adoption to be the same night as the second reading. So you could have the second reading 2 weeks from now, see where you're at. Final adoption could be subsequent to that. But nothing gets started unless you move forward with this anyways,
Right.
at this point.
So although we don't have a public hearing tonight, we certainly have options for public input tonight through our,
There's all kind of opportunity for public input.
that's what I'm saying,
and
but in a public place, not just with you,
outreach
but, right,
for some public.
right.
And we even, we communicated with the applicant, we communicated with folks that had expressed opposition to these things, that this was going to be going on tonight. When I say there's no public hearing, what I'm referring to is that formal public
Right.
hearing that requires
Right.
notice and those kinds of things.
Gotcha, okay.
This, the ordinance adoption process that's being discussed here is no different than any other general ordinance adoption process. There's nothing unique about that. This is a ordinance just like there was a sidewalk ordinance adopted in the general ordinance book.
My point is we have public comment tonight for items on this agenda. And it looks like no one took advantage of that tonight.
But it just says extraction ordinance. How do people know what that means? Either if they're looking online at the website and see that under new business, we have an introduction and first reading of proposed extraction ordinance. How do they know what the extraction ordinance is for? What, you know, maybe if it would have said, you know, extraction ordinance for sand and gravel pits, maybe there would have been more people here.
That's kind of our duty, though. We're the representatives of the people. These things are before us, we know. We talk to,
Well, you don't have much
Constituents
time
and
to talk to people, Tim. When I get this on Monday. I don't know when you guys get yours, but I get mine on Monday. So, I mean, you know, it's not like I got this and started calling people and saying, hey, you know, we're gonna have a,
I
you know, there's
received
a
mine
chance for public comment.
Thursday online.
We could our Thursday.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Thursday online it was.
well, you get them online, yeah, I guess, but,
Well, even then, the packets are emailed then. too.
well, it doesn't matter when we
Yeah.
get them. When does the public see it? The public
Thursday.
has more
Thursday.
advantage to see it.
The entire agenda packet
Right,
is
but
normal.
it
It's
just
on
said
the
on here,
agenda.
though, it just
Yeah.
says proposed extraction ordinance. It doesn't say what the extractants, or extraction ordinance is for.
I'm just pointing out.
No, I
that
know, I'm not
all
getting an argument.
60-some
I just-
pages are
I just wanna
online
move
on
on.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we knew this was coming, and when we put the moratorium in place, we set
Right.
this in
Right.
motion, and none of this should be a surprise.
Right.
Right.
No, it's a touchstone subject. I mean, it's passionate with people that are possibly having this on their doorstep, and
Sure.
you have an economic factor involved here too. I've always been one where I always try to look things from both sides of the street, and I try to be fair. I try to be in the middle. So I want to be fair to not only the residents, but I think we also have to be fair to that particular industry also. And I guess I would have feel a lot more comfortable if there would have been maybe more interaction with that industry, because we're jumping from one ordinance to another ordinance that's wholly more restrictive than the previous one. And my concern is frankly that what that could lead to. And do we want to walk down that road without doing a little bit more due diligence and communication and see if there are any concerns that they feel are within the ordinance? Maybe they can live with 99% of it, and maybe there's just a small portion that they say this is a non-doer for us. But I've always felt that we should always be fair to everybody, and we should always be looking from everybody's perspective on all this stuff. So that's where I would be at, and my personal belief is I would feel much more comfortable taking this process to the next meeting, and then in that interim, having more communication and going through with the people that are actually going to be, not just the residents. We've obviously we know where the residents are at with this, but I would like to see, where the industry is at with this.
I agree. I mean, I could think of right now 5 excavation companies in Isabella, or in Union Township. And how many of them know about this?
Yeah.
So from my seat looking at how this all came about, we had a private individual who wanted to excavate materials for his own use. That's what this came up about. I don't believe we have any shortage in our local area for getting sand and gravel. We got a local company that's got 200 trucks, gets sand and gravel every day, and ships it around the state from this area. So, we're simply taking something that came up, and if we looked at when the last ordinance was written, it'd be 1990 whatever, or 80, and we are in a process of looking at ordinances. We all know that, we all agree on it, getting the ordinance books, and we got 35 pages to digest.
Yeah, and
People to talk to.
we-
It's not I don't know why this, as Mark said, it's an ordinance, and we do ordinances all the time.
and it's
I
not like
understand
it's active in our community now. We have two sites that were used in the past.
Yeah.
Not
Are
like
they
people.
being used now?
What's that?
Are they being used now? I don't think-
Apparently
He said
not. No,
no.
they're not.
No,
And
he
that's
said
my
no.
point. And that's under the current
The only one
regulations.
was.
So it's not like the current regulations were having
Right.
people knocking down the door to do this in our community. So,
Right. I mean, we don't.
I don't
didn't
see
know
this-
there were two.
right. I see this protecting our neighbors, but I mean, I agree with you. You want to make sure that you're allowing industry to happen while protecting the property owners of surrounding
Right.
properties.
Yeah.
Balance is always good, Ben.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is, at least from what I read, if I sat in the planning commission and went through an SUP, those are the types of things that are described there that would be the kind of restrictions you, as a planning commission, want to put on the applicant. And the whole reason is to protect the property owners, make sure that you're able to reclaim that land when they're done with the process. I mean, those are all good ideas.
And also, I think, we have time for public comment before, there's the whole 3 minutes at the beginning of our agenda that people are able to come in and talk if they have an issue and that kind of thing. It's just a first reading. We also have the second reading that they can come in and they can comment at the next time as well. We can put it on halt at any time if we need to, it just, I don't know.
I would feel much more comfortable if there was a commitment to reach out to all the excavating companies in the area and have some type of input before we do anything on approving the ordinance. I mean, I'm fine with approving the first reading tonight, but I do believe that they should have some type of input on this before we ratify it.
like Brian said, you asked the question, if we don't have to do it tonight, you know? I mean, you know.
I was just trying to address Ben's
Yeah.
concern and asking
Yeah, I
what
mean,
that
we
did to
could
the
do it next
process,
meeting,
but,
like you said.
right. But we do have a motion on the floor. I'm
We do.
done.
Called to question?
Okay, we have a call to question, and the motion, if I remember correctly, was,
Is to introduce and conduct a first reading of the proposed extraction ordinance.
and then who do we have as a second on that?
I believe I did.
Yeah,
Okay,
Brian.
so we do have any further discussion? All right, so we put this to vote. Trustee Milky?
Are you doing roll?
Yep. It's an ordinance, I would have to think
Yep.
that we probably would want to do a
Yep.
roll
We're not
call.
passing ordinance, but sure.
Trustee Milky?
Yes.
Okay.
Treasurer Rice?
Okay, you're doing it now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes.
Trustee Howe?
No,
Trustee Lana?
Yes.
And I'm going to vote no. And just simply beyond the concerns that I have, it still passes though 3-2. I would feel wonderfully comfortable if we did reach out to the excavation companies in the interim to get feedback.
that's why I
That make
voted
me
no.
feel more comfortable.
I feel that it just says extraction, I don't know, whatever.
All right, this is going to move us to item 11, extended public comment, restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. If anyone would like to come forward for extended public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello. I'm Brian Morris. I live at 1140 Eastwood Drive. I read through the ordinance. I looked it up on Thursday. It was easy. I looked it up, I read through it, and it seemed to address everything that we would have a concern about. It doesn't say no gravel pits in the area, so that's a loss, but, I mean, safety and well-being is what you guys are here for, and I feel like we did that with this ordinance. In looking at other ordinances, I saw Deerfield's ordinance, and it was way more advanced than our SUP, and theirs is from 1990 as well. And it had a lot of the same things in this ordinance that Deerfield deals with as well. So I was happy when I found that one. I thought I was like, well, we could do something closer to this, and this is great. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And would anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, we close public comment. Move to item 12, manager's comments. Mark?
Thank you, and I do have a couple. I'll try to be quick. We will be taking delivery of the fire truck pretty soon. They may be down there right now, but I have a picture of it that you can just distribute. As indicated earlier, once we do take delivery of it, it'll need to be outfitted and put into, the firefighters will need to train on it before it's actually put in service. We are actively working with Nottawa Township to develop a utility right-of-way agreement, as their force main will travel down our right-of-way from, for the wastewater treatment, the flow of their wastewater to the city plant for treatment. So we're working with them on a right-of-way use agreement that ensures the township's interests are fully protected. The building official position will be posted this month. The open position will be posted this month. Somewhat related, Mr. Nanny was able to have conversations with McKenna, and that existing contract has been renegotiated, about 24% price reduction, about $33,000 a year. So while we have that, it's cheaper than it was a while ago.
Yeah, that's good.
And as I say, that the posting of that position will go up yet this month. A reminder that the annual meeting is April 29th, 5 o'clock. It's been moved from September. That's the opportunity for the chairs of the various committees and authorities, planning commission, ZBA, EDA, whatnot, to communicate to the Board of Trustees what they've been doing throughout the year, any concerns they may have or guidance they're looking for. And it's also an opportunity for the Board of Trustees, either via a spokesperson or individually, to communicate back to those bodies your priorities and desires and those kind of things. During that session will also be a presentation by the consultant to all of that group on the zoning code rewrite, and then immediately following that meeting, which starts at 5, I think the open house on the zoning code rewrite starts at 6:30 in the same location.
What is the venue, Mark? Is that
Commission on Aging,
Commission on Aging? Thanks.
5 o'clock, April 29th. The township is part of a group, and so I'm looking for a little guidance here, maybe the okay to move forward. The township's part of a group, I think I've brought this up in the past, at least once, maybe just once, working to create a water trail master plan to get state designation of a river trail, Chippewa River, from here basically all the way to Midland. This working group is the township, the city, the tribe, folks from Midland County, CMU. It's a rather large group. And the desired outcome is to get a master plan, a river trail designation, I'll call it master plan, developed. And that master plan would cost $21,000. And as a group, we thought we should apply for a 2% application on that. The trouble is, who applies for who does the application? And I volunteered to do the application subject to Board of Trustee approval, because I can't apply for 2% grants without your approval. And so there's no commitment being made on behalf of the township, no financial commitment. It was just me volunteering to do the grunt work, submit the application. If there's no funding request, there's no partner funding on this, we're asking for the entire cost, which is $21,000, to be provided by the 2%, but we need somebody to do the work. And so I throw that out there. If you're okay with me playing that role, I'm happy to do it for the group. If you'd rather not for different reasons, just let me know and I'll let them know that they got to find somebody else.
You're talking for the March
Yeah.
request?
Yeah.
Related to that, before you move on, are you asking for formal action from us on that, or you just need a sense?
I just need to know that I'm not violating the policy that requires your approval. I don't need the approval in a motion, but
I'm supportive.
I'm supporting.
Somebody's got to take charge when you're in a collaborative
Right, so thank
issue
you.
with-
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
with other governments, so I'm sure all of them are appreciative.
Yes.
thank you. And let's see, just to add a little bit more, and I know there was quite a bit of discussion in terms of the sidewalk and the pathway prioritization committee earlier tonight. What's going on this year in 2020 is the sidewalk pathway committee, prioritization committee, delivered to the township board over a year ago a policy statement that said, that the board adopted, that said this is kind of the direction we want to be going. And one of the things that it said was, let's call the waivers. And so we've been doing that. We're ramping that up again. The other thing it talked about was focusing sidewalks, pathways on designated streets. And they define these designated streets. So the activity that's been going on to date has been following that policy directive. It has not been real active, but we are, because of some additional resource brought to the township, able to ramp that up. The Lincoln Road, that effort is a result of the township board wanting to make sure, is sort of a counter to the push on the planning commission to make sure they're requiring developers to put these in with site plan and development, that it was noted that we have a lot of land right here next to a park, why don't we have a sidewalk? So it kind of made it difficult, and so the message was, let's put some money where our mouth is. That's where that project's coming from. And then, as indicated, the big task moving forward for the prioritization committee is to spend some time and then come meet in June, have some input that can be provided to the administration for budget development purposes in '21, and also time, again, when they meet in October, if they need to interface with the Board of Trustees. So there is a method to our madness about what we're doing in the sidewalk pathway area. And then the last thing, I know the coronavirus is on everybody's mind. We, the township, are going to continue to follow the guidance of the CDC, the local and state health officials and emergencies operations centers. The township right now continues to remain open for normal business. If we feel that needs to change, then we'll be having those conversations with the board. But we are continuing our current operations, and we are sensitive to the needs and the need to take measures to protect the health of the community and the staff. Right now, there's no plans as of 8:31 tonight to start canceling planning commission meetings next week or EDA meetings, or suggesting that the citizens don't come to this meeting. You know, you can't prohibit them if you're going to hold a meeting, but so that's what I had. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Ben.
I'm bringing water with me. Oh, goodness. All right, final board comments. Start with Tim.
None tonight, thanks.
Bill?
Oh, we need to discuss what we're gonna do for roads here, for gravel roads. So, we do that now? I mean, we need to have it into them here. I talked to Jim Pohl yesterday, and he said that it wouldn't hurt if we got it in. So,
Right now, it's an
I
agenda.
gotta get a drink of water.
what's that? Next week?
It's an agenda item for your next meeting.
'Cause I
And
only come up with 3.5 miles that we haven't done, and him and I had talked about that. But there are a couple of those that are 1/4 roads that he said we could put extra gravel on them to make them better. Like the one that Lisa lives on there by you, that Meadowlark, that's in bad shape, terrible shape. And then the other one that Jim and I talked about would maybe be Craig Hill, that goes up by the cemetery, Memorial Gardens.
that's on the list. Right now, what the agenda item looks like, what the request for board action looks like for the next meeting, and it's already been written and I've already reviewed it,
Right.
is taking the input from the road commission, and Craig Hill was one of those at our last, at the annual meeting. There's 4 miles that we need to identify, the various smaller pieces, and there's a larger piece. Ended up being 2 miles, and then there are 2 miles that are not identified
Just little ones, yeah.
that I think we're asking the board to tell us what you want done.
Well, I know like Millbrook, that last mile there, and then Lincoln Road, between Millbrook and Deerfield, those are 2 miles. You know, River Road then is at one east of Dellfield. That's like a 1/4 of a mile. That thing's got some businesses down it. It's in bad shape. I went down that yesterday. Whatever, we'll talk about it at the next meeting.
Kim?
I actually have a lot tonight.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. To piggyback off of Mark on the coronavirus, just for public, CMU has taken all of their classes. They're on spring break right now, but
Thank you.
they are going to be switching to all online classes after spring break until further notice. So just so the public knows that one. The tribe has a Friday annual fish fry, like it's Friday fish fries, that are currently canceled until further notice, and Special Olympics has also been canceled. So just things I heard there. And then I also wanted to say, she's not here tonight, but congratulate Lisa on the elections. She did a great job, her and Lynn and the staff and Mark and the election workers. They were constantly wiping things down and that. And one of the sanitizer bottles they were actually almost empty by the end of the elections for a couple of them. So, I mean, they were really trying to keep on making sure everything was clean and that kind of thing, and they did a great job. And Lisa did want me to make sure to thank everybody, the staff, the election workers, Mark, and everybody for all their hard work. So, okay, a couple more. And then MTA conference is still scheduled as of right now for April 27th through the 30th at Grand Traverse Resort. I'm currently going, and I think Tim is still planning to go, unless we're told otherwise. But, so that is a payroll week. And so Mark and I have gotten together, and he's gonna be doing payroll that week, so I wanted to make sure everybody knows I got it covered. So, that there. And then the last thing is just a clarification. I think it was the previous meeting, maybe it was the meeting before that. There was comment, Mr. Gunning, that the sidewalk and pathways liaison for the PC, the Planning Commission, and that was covered. It actually isn't yet. So there is not a representative as of yet. Diane actually came to the last meeting, even though she's going to be leaving us. So just kind of a correction there.
Yep.
So that's all of mine.
All right. Brian?
2 things, and you've already said it, but I got to say it again. Lisa, the election workers, staff, all need to be lifted up.
Yeah.
Every report I got was that the numbers were on, and it went as smooth as it could, and that's all under new Prop 3, right?
Yeah.
A lot of new changes. So kudos to everybody that made that successful. Good job, Lisa. And then secondly, I was digging through some of my old files and purging some of it. If you remember, I was on this board years ago, and I came across the ICRC report from 2013, and I thought you might find this interesting. So I'll make copies and send digital ones out. The interesting part for me was looking at the number of black miles, red miles, blue miles, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about, the Pazer ratings. And so you can see the difference because the documents they give us now in our annual meetings don't go this far back. So I'll share this with the board.
Perfect.
You're a hoarder, aren't you?
Yes.
Anyways, made you purge that.
I have one more thing, like on elections. I went around and helped her pick all the signs up for all the precincts last night. I don't know what voter turnout was, but like I know I asked them over at Jameson Park, and they said it was only like 15%. We had people last night, when I was leaving here, about 8:45, a couple ladies came up and wanted to vote. And they were upset that they couldn't vote. Lisa said, well, it ends at 8. And they weren't aware of that.
You've had a month to do it.
Well, and there were a lot of absentee ballots and
Yes,
people that
yeah.
voted absentee ballots, so you have to keep that in consideration because we didn't have that
Yeah,
before. And I mean, I know there were people still at 7:58 that came in to register to vote, and it closes at 8, and they had to hold it up. So I mean,
Wow.
they did good, getting everybody in to vote that could on time. So. Because
They
it,
looked
I mean, it
tired.
takes at least 10 minutes to register to vote.
A lot of
It-
them
it
looked
takes a long
tired
time.
yesterday.
Yeah, long day.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, I saw like
Yeah.
Tim's wife yesterday.
Yeah.
They all looked tired down at that precinct.
I used to work elections, so it's a long day. But it's rewarding, so.
My precinct was the Commission on Aging, and the group down there did a wonderful job. I liked how they had the exit for it was out the back door.
Yep.
That's, I think, a different setup
yeah,
than
right.
before. It used to be, came back in through the day, but it was nice because you're getting people out, so there wasn't a lot of, as much interaction,
Yeah.
you know, with crossing over with people. But, yeah, I thought it was like, it was about as smooth could be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she did a bang-up job.
And that actually brought, there was another person I was supposed to thank, and I don't remember their name, but it had to do with the Commission on Aging. There was another group also meeting there, and they allowed us to keep the room we were supposed to be in, and they moved a room over because of a scheduling conflict. So I know she's going to write a letter to them, but, sorry, Lisa, I don't remember the name.
Was that like
but
a woodworkers group or something?
I
Because
don't
when I
know.
left there last night, there were a bunch of
I-
people walking out and they
Yeah.
were,
Had power tools with them?
But-
no, they had like, maybe they were making, wooden puzzles and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know, but I know she's gonna, write him a letter of thanks, but, so.
All right, I got two things. First of all, from what I understand, at the university, everything's going to be online, and they're going to be encouraging students not to be here in Mount Pleasant and not
Correct.
to be in the dorms.
Correct.
So
Unless.
this is going to be
Yeah.
a very trying time for local businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I would encourage people is, we all want to be safe, obviously, but we also want to make sure that we support
Our business.
our restaurants, right? I mean, get the food to go, maybe. Take it home, or just go ahead and just be careful when you're there. But this is going to be a really trying time for a lot of businesses to lose the students essentially 6 weeks, early. I mean, in a lot of businesses, golf courses, that this is their busy time, and the students, I'm in the golf industry, and I'll tell you, we haven't had a spring in 3 years, so it would be bittersweet was to actually have good weather in April for once and then have nobody there to enjoy it. So I just want to make sure, encourage people that they support local businesses, support seasonal businesses.
With that really quick, my understanding is it's only until March 23rd when they will take and, look at it week by week to see if they need to keep extending it on. So as far as I am aware, it's not the entire time, it's just week by week right now
Okay,
until the
I'd seen
23rd.
April 20th, and I wasn't sure.
I think that was
Okay.
MSU, I think.
No, that
Yeah.
was Central too, it was April 20th.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, I saw the March date for Central.
yeah,
Yeah, my
Okay.
wife does a lot of business with the university, and they had told her in
Okay.
building that they're gonna be trying to keep the students away.
okay, sorry.
In our last meeting, we had discussed the special assessment districts and the fees and the amortization schedule that's involved currently with those districts. And it was a pretty strong point of conversation at the end. And I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. And I don't want to do anything formally with it this evening, but I do feel that it should be on our next agenda item if Mark could put that on there.
What would you like on?
We have the special assessment districts, looking at the fee structure, administrative costs, and amortization schedules.
Probably discussion for the first meeting, right?
Yep.
Just so we can better understand.
Yep,
That-
exactly,
You-
where things are at.
I don't know if you watched our last meeting, but it may be worth
I
watching the
have,
end. Okay.
The fee structure, help me with that.
Um,
I mean, I get the, well, I
There
think I
was
understand what you mean when
The
you say.
administrative fee is the one question, the amortization schedule.
I mean, how long somebody ought to be able to pay back?
Yeah,
over-
but it used to be at 10, and from what I understand, it's 5 now. And I think those were the two questions that had come up. There was, I think, 3 different subdivisions that were looking at possibly doing that, and it kind of has been an issue where maybe what our fees currently are in the amortization schedule, where it currently is kind of dissuaded some of those subdivisions from pursuing. And so I think what we're trying to do in the discussion was basically is just trying to get a handle on where we were, where we are now, and where do we need to be.
And I
I
think,
get the administrative fee, I understand that. I understand your question on, that you need some guidance on in terms of the amortization. You mentioned a fee schedule. I'm not aware of a fee schedule.
Well, I mean, I think the
that
administrative
pertains
fee
to-
was what I was
Okay, so
referring
there's
to.
two.
Yeah.
There's two.
Yeah.
Okay.
and I think it's important and part of that discussion for the Board of Trustees to make sure we understand what the goal of that program is, right? And how we want it to be effective or not effective, and
I'll
what
bring
its
to you
purpose
your
is.
existing policy, which is where all this is coming from. And then you'll be able to discuss whether or not you want to change that.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. And beyond that,
Did Brian?
do we have any, what's that?
No, I
Oh,
have anything.
You already went.
You want me to say
That's
something
right,
again?
sorry.
We can go on.
No, you've said enough. So we do need to get a motion to adjourn at this point.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 No, meeting adjourned?
Sorry for being.